Welcome to the Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth podcast with Gary Helt. Gary is an expert in helping business owners put together a plan that will provide a better future for their businesses, themselves, and their families. On the podcast, Gary interviews other professionals who share his vision, and together they share secrets and strategies any business owner can use to build a better financial foundation for your business and your life.
Hey, welcome back to the podcast. This week, my guest is Ursula Taylor, and she is a conflict resolution strategist with over 17 years of experience as an attorney and business advisor. And she helps individuals and teams navigate and solve conflicts efficiently and holistically, utilizing strategic methods that go beyond traditional dispute resolution. Welcome, Ursula.
Thank you for having me, Gary.
Sure. So what made you make your transition from really being that attorney to now being more of a dispute resolution specialist?
Yeah. Thanks for that question. Yeah, to be honest, I got to a point in my career where I owned my own law firm, had my own practice and clients, and I felt really limited by the litigation process. I was leading my cases and matters and dealing with usually in-house legal counsel. I largely represented managed care plans. And what I found is the disputes I was handling at the end of my litigation chapter were generally like plans fighting with, say, doctors or laboratories or physical therapists or other healthcare providers. And in the litigation process, it's facts, laws, and arguments. It's figuring out who's right versus who's wrong. But I happen to know what litigation costs. I happen to know what it gets you. I happen to know what it doesn't get you. And there's two problems. It's incredibly expensive and uncertain. So there's no guarantees, and there's also no control in terms of your ability to get out of the litigation once it's underway. So it's a very blunt instrument, a very expensive instrument. And what I would see is that the disputes were largely just about relationship issues. Human emotion is at the center of every dispute, even when you're dealing with healthcare plans and doctors or other commercial entities. I also represented insurance companies and other businesses earlier in my career. And there's no place for that. There's no place for really dealing with that within the litigation or arbitration process. And in fact, people become really afraid to say anything that might be authentic or real or relate to feelings, right? Because their guards are really up and they're trying to be super strategic about every piece of information and all the dialogue. So it becomes really hard to get back to what's actually driving this dispute in terms of the humans and the emotion and the stuff. And we become distracted in the facts, laws, and arguments. So I just found it limiting and inefficient. And I frankly just got to a place where I couldn't do it anymore. But I still wanted to serve. Nothing's wasted. My skill sets are valuable. What I know from my litigation practice is valuable, especially to smaller and mid-sized businesses.
How do you go about, I'm going to say, finding your clients, and how do you go about convincing them to sit down and talk with you without going the litigation route?
Sure. I mean, when you understand what litigation is and is not and what it gets you and what it costs, I think it's an easy sell. I mean, I've never done a litigation budget through trial for less than $300,000-$400,000. And that's if all the stars align. There's usually like a page of assumptions about what the judge on the other side will agree to or do. And if all the stars align, maybe we can get you through discovery and trial for X. I practice in Chicago, so my rates were what they are or what they were. So maybe less in smaller towns and things. But litigation's really expensive and it can be devastating to small businesses and families. So what you want to do is have a strategy oriented around resolution, around solutions, really. You want to get to a place where you can answer the question, what do I need? And it's not righteousness or victimhood or about the other person. It's What do you need for your business function in alignment with your business goals? And some people can answer that more easily than others. Some people need a little work and a little help and a little facilitation to get to that because they're a little more mired in the emotion. And that's what I do. I get people to answer that question, and I help them release their own sort of emotion, find and release their own sort of emotional charge, so you can have a little more clarity and utilize strategies more effectively in terms of the negotiation or whatever paths are taken.
It seems like you and what you're dealing with it's a lot of emotion, and some people just want their pound of flesh, even though it makes no sense to somebody from the outside. And I guess because you're coming in there and you're not evolved in the emotion side of it, you're that outsider coming in, you're able to kind of hopefully temper some of the emotion that's going on. How I guess how do you go about helping that person realize that, okay, right now you're being emotional
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
you want your pound of flesh, but let's take a
Hmm.
step back from that. So how do you
Hmm.
get them
Hmm.
to look at it differently?
Right, right. There's sort of a it depends on who I'm dealing with. It's everything's highly customized to the people in the business. It depends who I'm dealing with. So I would say there's two approaches to that. There's sort of the pragmatic, rational approach, appealing to that person, or maybe it's that person's partner or colleagues too. Maybe you have to bring in some other people and have a little bit more of a broader perspective on it. But I'll go through, okay, you want your pound of flesh. That's fine. Let's talk about that. Let's understand that. Let's understand what that is. Because not to disparage litigation attorneys, but when the first person you're calling to get the answers to those questions is the person who bills by the hour, if and when you take your case, why not speak to a professional who sees litigation as just one arrow in the quiver? Talk to someone who's willing to be uh, more aligned to your business goals and serve in sort of a broader way. So we can have that. We can talk about the pound of flesh, and I think it's a really valuable exercise to go through it. And if folks choose that, they're like, "Listen, I appreciate what you're doing, but I really need to kick the SHIT out of this person, and I don't care what it costs." And it's like, "Okay, great. Here's a couple law firms that I would recommend."
Right.
But most small to mid-sized businesses and larger business too, they are not driving their bottom line. They're not driving profits by being right and making other people wrong. They have better things to do, you
Right.
know? And what I found in my career is that they want out. They want out. They want a solution. They want to figure this out. They just don't know how. And the lawyers that they call first are not trained and equipped to do anything except perpetuate and amplify the dispute through facts, laws, and arguments.
Right. Um, I guess you've talked about, hey, the lots of times that business owner, whoever goes to that type of attorney, right off the bat. Besides that, what are some of the common mistakes that you see business owners making when the conflict starts?
Sure. Common mistakes that are made is this false sense that I'm right, and so I'll just get a judge to tell them. It's a lot more complex than that.
Right.
Uh, Once you get going in a litigation process, a lot is out, most of it's out of your control. You're bringing in another side, lawyers on both sides, a judge, and for every piece of ammunition you put forth because your attorney is sharp and good, the other side's sharp and good too, right? What we learn in law school is that the story is the eye of the beholder, and we're trained as attorneys to present a compelling case. And every dispute is driven by human emotion. Guess what? Judges and arbitrators are humans too. And what the trial attorneys are ultimately doing is they're trying to recruit the judge or the arbitrator into that emotion. So at the end of the day, through litigation or arbitration, you're driving an emotionally driven result. Why not just contend with that at the outset and leave the arbitrator and the judge out of it?
Right. Can you give us an example of one of your many cases that you've had,
Sure,
that you've helped people do this, just so the listeners can understand kind of
sure, sure.
what's going on?
Sure. I've helped a client with a partnership dispute. He had a 50-50 partnership with another individual, and it unraveled and sort of fell apart, and it's a ton of emotion because there was an underlying friendship and relationship there, a
Mhm.
ton of emotion. And he needed more than just a litigator. He needed someone who was like a quasi litigator kind of coach, quasi therapist to help him like really see what this is about, what this is about for him more broadly in his life. So it's about building some of that trust so that and having some of that open dialogue. And when people are mired in this, they do want safe spaces to share. They do want places to just
Mhm.
sort of vent. And I try to set up my compensation so that I'm not billing by the hour because I try to come up with flat fees and things like that so that we can just get the job done. People do want space, and it's so important. They're craving that and they need that because that's how they get under it into the underlying feelings and emotion for themselves. So they can start to get some clarity about what do I really need here. So in that one between the two partners, it was a lot of just listening, a lot of just like, sort of building that trust, creating space to find that emotion and that feeling. It's a little bit like an executive coach
Right.
maybe a professional oriented therapist would serve. But I'm also bringing in that practical sort of litigation because they want that's intermixed in it. That's a huge part of it. So they want to understand different aspects of things. And so just slowly getting it takes some time sometimes when people are really invested in the dispute. Another engagement that I helped with was somebody separating from a very large corporation as an employee, as an executive, and a lot of human emotion in that one too, and wanting to jump straight to litigation. So helping her unpack some of that emotional charge because we don't have clarity about what we need. We don't have clarity about how best to get there. We don't have clarity how to efficiently get there when we're wrapped up in the drama and the emotion. And then we're able to sort of cut through some of that and get to more the strategic issues.
Yeah, I could see where, like your example there with somebody who's a key employee that decides to leave because whatever. And there's, and this is one of the things that I found with many business owners. It started off kind of quickly. There's no documents. There's
Mhm.
nothing's in writing, and everything is like, well, they told me that they were going to do this for me, and so forth. And then someone's feelings get hurt because that hasn't been done, or
Mhm.
even the business owner passes, and now you're dealing with the family.
Right,
Um, can you
right.
talk about some of that and how, as a business owner or even that key employee, that we can try to help, stop some
Yeah.
of this before it even gets there?
Right. That's really what I like to do is I have this what I call litigation doula, sort
Yeah.
of like the supporting the pre-litigation and through litigation. But I really prefer to just deal with people early when it's more of just sort of a tension point
Hmm.
and I help facilitate the dialogue and building the awareness. We get really lost in blame and fault. And as I was saying earlier, like nobody's bottom line is driven by being right and making other people wrong. But as humans, we get really lost in blame and fault. But what we really want as business owners and leaders is solutions, efficient solutions. So what I do is try to facilitate the dialogue, facilitate the spaces that start to feel safe enough to have the dialogue. I work individually and then kind of bring people together. I speak individually people to understand the themes because when you're in that sort of like emotionally charged space, you need spaces to release that.
Right.
You don't really want that to be your counterpart in the negotiation or your coworker or your business partner. You kind of want to work through some of that with someone who's going to be trusting and empathetic and understanding and also bring that pragmatic, strategic element to it. Because the reality is I don't see blame and fault. I just see fear and feelings. That's what I tell people. Like all your feelings and fears are safe and honored and valid because we have to do that in order to feel them and find them and feel them and kind of release them.
Sure.
So there's that kind of like kind of therapeutic piece to it. And I do that with the individuals. So they're not trying to sort of like get their pound of flesh like with each other or to have those emotionally charged interactions with each other. And we learn things and we slowly get to, okay, what do I need? And when we're answering the question, what do I need? It's more like an Excel spreadsheet. It's black and white. It's neutral. You're
Right.
neutral. You're operating as a business leader who's solving a problem. And that's where I want to get people to. And I can discern when they're not there yet, which is helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine that many times there is so much emotion that's involved that the people you talking to them individually, getting that story, getting that side of things, and then when you really look at it, it's like, okay, well, both of you guys really want the same thing.
Mhm.
It's just, you have this stumbling block that you don't think that he or she wants the same thing, and that person from the outside able to put this together, I think is something that's very important, with business owners, even and maybe this may even be something where it's like, hey, let's not wait until there's a conflict.
Hmm.
Let's have
Hmm.
you come in and talk about, and be part of our professional team to come in and talk about, hey, this is where we're trying to go. And hey, Bob, what do and you're talking to them individually, hey, Bob, where do you see this going? And then, hey, Sally, where do you see this going type thing. So then you can head off the conflict before it even starts because you can see, okay, well, Sally's thinking one thing and Bob's thinking, something totally different. And you can see that, hey, there's a train coming and this isn't going to be pretty.
Yeah, I can see it. And I've seen the small misunderstandings, lack of awareness, miscommunication, and some feelings blow up into months and tens of thousands of dollars in litigation or hundreds of thousands of dollars in litigation, where if we could have found those fear and feelings easy earlier, we could have gotten on track. And I'm uniquely equipped, I believe I'm uniquely equipped to do this because I've done so much work myself in my own life.
Right,
I'm extremely self-aware. So I'm not afraid of their stuff. I'm not afraid of their explosions and their things. And I've seen a lot of mediators that kind of shut down when people get big. I think that's great because that means they're they're finding their stuff, right?
right,
And if you can have an empathetic person in the room that's like, I hear you, I see you. I was working with an executive team recently, and this was more of a sort of team cohesion. It's a group that's sort of in an inflection point in their growth as a small to mid-sized business. And the cohesion among their partners and management team is they understand is incredibly important. But they've got different personalities and sort of different ways of being and doing, and their stuff comes up. And the founder of the company, he was just, we were speaking about some feedback about, I think it was like a parental leave policy or something like that. We were speaking about some feedback, and several different people got defensive about the feedback that was coming up. Like some lower level management were not happy with parental leave.
right,
And I'm sitting there with the founder, and he's just all armor. And he's like, "This, we are done with this conversation. We have vetted this. This is what it is." And then he said, and this cuts really deep because I care. And I just like grabbed onto that, right? So he offered me that this cuts really deep, which was huge. And then I just kind of went with that. Like,
right,
that cuts really deep for you. Like, I get that. You've built this organization, you understand the importance of your people and your human capital and how much this matters to you. That cuts really deep. And like, we found it together and we sat in it together. And then 10 minutes later, he's feeling different. He's less defensive. He's like,
Yeah.
Well, we can't do more leave now, but as we move on, as the company grows, we can revisit this. We can keep talking, and that's the right energy.
Yeah.
It's less about where they landed on the parental leave, but that closed up, defensive, and it's an underlying fear-based feeling, right? It's something to do with like an insecurity. Like it hurt his feelings that
Right.
people were upset about the
Right.
parental leave. And we needed to kind of sit in that and release that to get some clarity about what the organization actually needs.
Yeah.
So,
I
yeah.
think lots of times as business owners, you know, we feel that we are doing a lot for our staff through different programs and things like that. So sometimes it does hurt our feelings to hear that, they want more or they want something different or whatever. And I think it's like every other relationship that's out there, there needs to be the communication. And if there
Hmm.
can't be the respectful communication, that's when all of this stuff is gonna pop up. Uh,
Exactly.
do besides yourself, because um, I don't see too many of yous out there doing
There.
this. I mean, is this something that you see in the future that's evolving to this, or do you think it's just, you've created an awesome niche and you're running with it, type thing? What do you see?
I feel both. Like I feel I'm uniquely qualified for
Right,
this work. But I do think my highest objective would be to train leaders and others to do this, to bring sort of what we know from like mental health modalities, what we know from mindfulness, what we know from our own human experience,
right,
and very sort of practical litigation, dispute resolution, negotiation strategy with that, and bring the two together because everything's driven by human emotion. And in corporate America, in legal systems, in these places, we repress or try to control or ignore. And we spend a lot of time and energy trying to figure out how to look like we don't have an emotion when we always do.
sure,
So let's honor it, cut through it, deal with things efficiently, grow along the way, get stronger and better on the way as individuals and get back to what we're here to do as organizations.
right, right. Um, What advice would you have, I'm going to say, for your 21-year-old self,
Hmm.
coming out of school and looking at this, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently? What advice would you have had for yourself?
I really wouldn't not have done anything differently. I feel like nothing's wasted. I feel like I needed that first half of my career. I needed the credentials. I needed the
Right,
skill sets in terms of communication and discernment and fact investigation and storytelling. I needed all of that to get to where I am now, which is really kind of evolving around the limited ways of legal and alternative dispute resolution systems and trying to guide people into something that's not gonna break the bank and send them in the wrong direction, get them back to their business goals. There's ways to do it. We just are starting to figure out how.
right. So Ursula, we've covered a lot, and I could keep going. I find this pretty fascinating. What have I not asked you? You wish I had.
What's that?
What have I not asked you? You wish I had.
The question I love is how is conflict opportunity? So how is conflict opportunity? It's opportunity because when you can have sort of a tension point or a conflict, maybe even an argument, maybe even a heated argument that comes up, it sort of shines a light on what each person who's participating in it might hold, if you're willing to look at it in that more internal way. And the internal strategies are key to efficient resolution. You have to be able to have your own awareness. The conflict becomes this beautiful opportunity to see, I reacted pretty big right there. What was that about? Somewhere in there, there's probably like hurt feelings, some scarcity feelings, some fear about money or imposter syndrome or something. And what we're seeing today is that so we had the industrial revolution, we had the technological age, and now we're cusping into something new and different. I would call it the human age. We have AI for the facts and the figures. What leaders are really called to do is do some of that more human emotional work. Conflict becomes the opportunity to do that because we see where we get tense, where we react, where we get upset. And if you're willing to do sort of more internal work instead of just going external in terms of your fight, then it's a beautiful opportunity to sort of become stronger as a leader and also improve your teams.
So Ursula, people like what they hear. They want to learn more about what you're doing and about you. How can they reach out to you?
Sure, you can find me on my website. It's www.conflictreimagined.com. Check me out, some of the things I've written and published. There's an inquiry form there, I believe, or you can just email me directly at ursula@conflictreimagined.com. I'd be happy to do a free consult with any of your listeners to talk about what tension points or conflicts or potential disputes people are facing or feel they may be facing.
Great. Really appreciate your time today. I think it was a great conversation we had.
Thank you, Gary.
Sure. Hey, this week my guest was Ursula Taylor, and she's a conflict resolution strategist. And I'll see you guys next week.